Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. The school year is well underway and students and teachers from throughout the region are hard at work, and behind the scenes, administrators are as well. And today we have visiting with the Joplin School Superintendent, Dr. Melinda Moss. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
We've had a little bit of time. School's been underway for a few weeks. What are your feelings as superintendent now that things are rolling?
I think we're off to a great start, and this is my second full year, so I'm not as brand new as I was this time last year, and Joplin's truly on the move, and I got here at the perfect time, and we're having fun.
Great. Well, how do you compare year number one to year number two? Is there anything that you've noticed different the second time around? This year?
For myself personally?
Yeah, as a superintendent.
Just more familiarity and getting to know faces and places around the community. So now when I endeavor to do something, I think I did this once before last year. So it's better.
Okay. Well, I know you have a district-wide meeting with all your staff and faculty and to kick things off.
Yes.
What are some of the keys to success to have that strong start at the beginning of the year?
I think just building on your strengths and bringing that positivity to that event. It was a celebration, and we brought together not just the teachers, but all of our faculty and staff, because we want to honor our food service and our maintenance and our transportation, because it takes everyone to serve our students. And so it was just a kickoff where we celebrated each other and the mission and purpose we have in getting to take care of children. And we had a good speaker, and again, just making sure that everyone felt really good about the start of the year.
So really building that sense of community within the district with the people who are there.
Exactly, because with 14 different campuses, it's easy to get isolated, and to realize that we are all Joplin School District is very important.
And we're talking about from preschool all the way through.
Yes, we've had a big focus this year on our pre-K with our new Joplin Early Childhood Center, but then also on the adult education side too, with the changes in moving some of our programs back to Memorial Hall and with adult ed as well. So it's truly pre-K, even beyond 12th grade.
Right, we'll talk about some of those programs and what you have to offer today. And it sounds like it's always something that's evolving as well. That,
yes.
1 year is not the same. The next year changes.
Never. And if you ever think you're setting static, then you're going backwards. So we're always looking ahead.
So what's the key to success for keeping that momentum going? Our school years, even here on the university campus, everybody's excited. It started the year in August. You're in October. How do you keep that type of attitude going?
Well, I think through collaboration and encouraging and supporting one another, which we've really tried to build a collaborative culture. That helps, and that people not feel isolated. Communication's always important, and we're always striving to improve that. And then I think just setting your data points and looking at the progress so that you can have those incremental wins. And it's not always about getting to the spring. It's about what's happening daily, weekly, monthly, and so forth. That kind of helps you keep encouraged.
So just as students get a quarterly report grading, the teachers and the faculty are looking at what have we accomplished in the last couple of weeks.
Absolutely, yes.
And I know that a lot of people in the community are aware there's certain days when you have teachers, used to call them teachers meetings or in-service type people. People might ask, well, why do we need those? Is that an example of getting people together to talk about things they couldn't do otherwise?
Yes, it is. And we just completed one of those days. I think it was Monday. My days run together. But we do get together and we look at interim assessment data and we look at, and drill down even to the specific child level to see what skills are they mastering, but also what skills do we need to go back and remediate. And is it an instruction and curriculum issue, or is it an individual child issue? And all those things are analyzed. And it's kind of the adage of you can take time to sharpen your saw and cut more trees, or you can keep hammering away with the same dull saw. And sometimes we need to have that time to sharpen our saw.
Right. Well, I know you mentioned assessment, and that seems education's always being assessed or reviewed, and the state of Missouri does that as well. You have report cards that come out. And so recently, looking at your website, there was some information from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, kind of giving the report card for the district. This is something that you then take a look at closely?
Oh, sure. And I think the one that's on their site now is from 17, and we're eagerly awaiting the one from 18. And we've gotten some preliminary data that's still in the data cleanup stage, but it's looking positive, particularly on one issue that we focused on this year, which was attendance. Right. And we're trying to put things in place to improve our attendance and encourage our students and parents to make sure kids are in school as much as possible. And we've seen some improvement in our attendance rate.
So do you have a certain goal? We want for a certain percentage of attendance?
Well, 100% would be great. I know that the state has had some minimum standards, like 90% of your kids attend school 90% of the time. Okay. And they've changed some of that recently to start attending to partial credit for 89%, 89.5%, things like that. But definitely we'd like to see all of our kids. But if we could get to around 94%, that's kind of what I keep in the back of my mind, because that's a good number.
So what are some examples of things that the district can do to encourage not only the students but the parents to make sure their kids are in school?
Sure. Well, we've kind of changed how we provide those letters to parents and providing them more of the data piece of it, and not just a student's missed 5 days, but how does that compare to the campus overall? Oh, okay. And so we're calling those nudge letters. We're piloting those this fall. We've also started some attendance committees in some of our campuses, again, to pilot when a student does have chronic absenteeism. Can we bring the family in and put supports around them to build an attendance plan to try to get the students there more often? And then we've talked a lot with Judge Crane's office, with the juvenile office, and what's our protocol going forward. And through a memorandum of understanding, which I believe will go before our school board just next week, we now have a juvenile officer that is housed at our high school. Oh, okay. And with the whole idea of keeping kids in school, keeping kids out of the system, and putting the supports around them that they need.
A lot of people may not realize there's a lot of external factors that come into play probably when someone's not coming to school.
Right.
So the community as a whole has a lot of role they can play in supporting those different things behind the scenes.
Yes, and the more that we can get that synergy around all of our programs and have partnerships and working together, then the more impactful we will all be.
Great. And I imagine that attendance rate then in turn, especially with the high school, plays a role into your ultimate graduation rate.
It does. It's a good indicator of what's to come.
And people might be curious, how has the graduation rate moved in Joplin?
I'm not sure that it's moved a lot in the last few years, and so we're looking at that again by putting more supports around students, because when we talk about learner support, it's not just the academic side, but also, is it the mental health side? Is it the social work aspect of things? So we've been very fortunate this year to add supports in that respect. Missouri Southern, for example, is sending their social work interns to our schools. So we now have those housed on our campuses to provide extra supports and another watchful eye on our students. And then through some Medicaid billing changes in the law, we're able to now partner with Ozark Center for some school-based mental health services. Right. And so that's something that's been expanded this year. And then Title IV funding through the federal government has allowed us some behavior liaisons, and that would be more or less with our middle school population. So it's not just, when you talk about graduation rate, it doesn't just start at 9th grade.
Once you hit high school, right?
It builds upon itself all the way from pre-K to 12. And I think even the supports in the new Joplin Early Childhood, we've been able to expand that by 80 students this year at pre-K, and it all goes together.
So if you start off early knowing that school is an important part of your life, the chances of at the end when you walk across that stage at graduation are going to be there.
Yes, and the earlier those students can feel a sense of success, then that attitudinal change is there.
Great. Well, you mentioned the Early Childhood Center, which was big news this year, and the facility and the services. How is that moving along? As people say, the new buildings there, you have more students. How is that working for the district?
Well, it's working wonderfully, and there's always a waiting list to get into programs like that in our community, and I don't think we could ever have enough.
So it's not big enough for the demand, right?
No, but it's so much better than it was, and that was truly a wonderful gift to the Joplin community. And that was built up through the efforts of Senator Ron Richards and the economic development grants and our city partnerships, and it's just a jewel for the whole Joplin community.
Now, for people who may not be familiar with the details, what ages are we talking about when we talk about pre-K?
Oh, I think it begins really with our Parents as Teachers program that can go out even from birth.
So as soon as you have that child, they can visit.
Make those home visits and talk to mothers and fathers about things that they can do with their child and what their developmental milestones are. I know as a young mother years ago, living in the Springfield area, when my first child was born, I had my parent educator there, and they came and visited the home, and we really formed a relationship, and I learned a lot about child development being one of those mothers that was visited by parents as teachers. So then that goes all the way through to kindergarten.
So that prepares them, and then they can come to the actual facility, the school itself, to get that additional work with the children. What are you hearing from the parents who may have youngsters in the Early Childhood Center?
Oh, just a sense of joy, and that they're happy to have a quality program to which to bring their children. And it's an excellent remediation for students that may have developmental delays or have special education needs, because the earlier we can catch those and start to work on those, then by the time they do enter kindergarten, first grade, second grade, oftentimes those issues have been remediated.
Take care before they even get to kindergarten. I know when the program was being discussed, one of the key terms I think was being the readiness for kindergarten.
Yes.
So are you finding that maybe the kindergarten teachers are a little more excited, or knowing that they're going to have students prepared when they come in?
Yes, and some of those readiness screeners are indicating that that is improving.
So that's a big start off strong with the children coming in from the very beginning.
Yes.
So the facility itself, you have the programs that are out there. If people have questions, you say you have a waiting list. What do they need to do if they, or maybe somebody new to town said, I heard you have the center. How do you get involved?
Oh, well, I think just give us a call. Our phone numbers are on the website. And we can refer you to the people you need to talk to. Melinda St. Clair is the director there at Joplin Early Childhood Center, and we welcome inquiries and visits, and we love to show off our new facility.
Great. Well, you have the young ones, and then of course you move through the different grades, and you have elementary and the middle schools and the high school, and then of course the adult education you mentioned at the beginning. Some new programs at the Memorial Education Center. Tell me about that.
Well, for years, a lot of our health occupation type programs have been housed right here on Missouri Southern's campus in your criminal justice building. But the university was starting to see a need for that space. So we've been in conversation about, well, where do we go with our Franklin Tech programs? And so looking at Memorial Hall, which we just celebrated its 100th birthday last January, and it's still a fine facility, and I love working in that
building. The district in many ways, hasn't it?
But the interesting thing about Memorial Hall is it's 100 years old. It's one of the few buildings of that age that has stayed true to its original purpose throughout all its years.
So it started off serving the district for schools.
It started off serving education, and it's still serving education, and that's kind of rare to find in a building that old, and it's a fine structure. So the whole first floor was something that we looked at and thought, we have a lot of space here. I think with some remodel, we can make this work. So we're starting now with that construction and getting that ready, and hopefully by the summer of 2019, we'll be ready to move some of those programs.
So move those programs into there and have facilities there.
Yes, and so it'll still be Franklin Tech Center Adult Ed, and respiratory therapy and dental hygiene is still staying here on the MSSU campus. So we still have a strong partnership with the university.
Now you mentioned you enjoy working there. For the viewers, it's also administrative headquarters.
Yes, we have several of our offices there. Our tech department is there. And a lot goes on in that building.
So that building is one that could have been perhaps shuttered because it was 100 years old, and we have a lot of other facilities, but the district kept it alive, basically, by using it.
Yes, it's a fine structure, and it's well located, and it has truly stood the test of time.
Great. Well, I know you had mentioned 14 different facilities around the district or buildings. So you have, of course, the high school, I guess, would be one of the newer buildings that you've rebuilt within a few years, and the new middle school, they went through a stage of growing. Is this something the district's always looking at as facilities? What do we have? What are the needs of the ones that may be getting old?
Yes, and as we look at demographic changes across the district and what are the areas where we're growing, what are the areas where enrollment's staying more flat, and do we need to look at zones and boundaries? Those can be looked at in some years fairly superficially, and then you reach a point where you really need to take a deep dive into it. And we feel like we've reached the point where we do really need to take a deep dive. And that's one of the things that we've placed on next week's school board agenda, is to look at looking at those analytics and engaging maybe even an outside agency to help us with that, because that's what the district has endeavored to do every 5 years or so many years. And we are seeing growth patterns shift, particularly to the southeast of town. So we really need to look at and start getting a plan for that growth. It's always a good problem to have when you have growth, and I think we'll be able to solve it.
So when you build a building or a new school, you say it can handle X number of students, but you have to go back and make sure that things around that aren't growing up so fast that fills up too fast.
Exactly, exactly.
And of course, newer facilities, you have some older facilities. I'm sure there's challenges there as far as maintaining older buildings, like people with older homes know that you have to deal with that.
Always.
And tying a lot together. So looking at facilities, but also programs within the district. You mentioned that looking at the programs, reassessing. Let's start off with the elementary level, the types of things that maybe have changed or continue to develop in dealing with the youngsters at the elementary age.
Okay. Well, one thing that comes to mind really quickly is our math program. And when we were analyzing our assessment data from not this past spring, but the prior spring, one of the things that was really coming out was the idea of numeracy. And students not just knowing how to solve an equation on a piece of paper, but understanding the depth of why that particular operation works and why it's applicable. And it starts with your elementary students in understanding place value and understanding patterning and being able to estimate. And those are all cognitive functions that help you solve real-world problems. So we've been working on curriculum a lot in that area, and letting students struggle a bit with those concepts so that they learn the why behind it. It goes to depth of knowledge. So we've implemented some curriculum called Eureka Math, along with a program called ZERN, that then they can go on and work independently to remediate those skills. And we're seeing a lot of positive feedback from that. The kids are enjoying it and they're more engaged, and I think it'll really enhance our test scores going forward. That's just one of the things. One of the
examples. And math is probably one of those subjects that you don't want to get discouraged early. You don't want the youngsters at an early age saying, I don't understand, because they're going to face it throughout their life, obviously.
Right. And we want them to see the application of that knowledge and the why behind what they're doing.
Tying that together. Now the middle schools. What's happening with an example of middle schools?
Well, following that same theme, we have engaged with the Go Math series at the middle school, and really trying to just get a standardization across the district to a certain extent of what our curriculum is.
So if you're at this school and somebody's at that school, you're still learning the same, so you can get prepared.
And getting those scope and sequences similar so that we're not teaching different things at different times, because we have a lot of transiency around our district. People move from one part of town to the other and so forth. So if I have a student that goes from Rural Heights to Stapleton, or Stapleton to Soaring Heights, or what, we need to be somewhat similar.
Right. So they're not saying, I learned this 3 weeks ago, why am I looking at it again?
Exactly. Or, God forbid, there's a gap in they totally miss a certain concept. So Dr. Gilbreth is our director of curriculum, and he's worked very hard with many teacher groups over this past year, because that's one of the goals we set out for ourselves, is to get those strong scope and sequence and strong standards in place. And we're starting to see it come together.
Great. Now, the high school, of course, has gone through a lot of programs. I know we heard about career tracks, different things. How are things working out at the high school, and what, along those lines, as students come into that last 4 years of their education?
Well, that's another thing that we're constantly trying to strengthen is to make sure that those pathways are there and that it's communicated. And I think we've seen some improvements in our handbooks and things like that for this year, because as we go through, we learn. One thing that's kind of along the same lines is our Project Lead the Way program. We have a very strong Project Lead the Way in biomedical sciences as well as the engineering math side of things. And as I went to their end of the year project presentations this spring, I was so impressed. And that's a program that continues to grow and very, very much a highlight. So
the end result of high school is that college and career readiness, that when they leave with that graduation, that diploma at 18 or from high school, they have a goal of what they want to do.
Absolutely. And even at the governor's level and our State Department of Education, that's really been a theme lately, is workforce development. And so we're very eager to partner with the governor's initiatives and things such as that to even enhance our workforce readiness. And I know it's an issue for our community as well.
You've mentioned, state and so forth. So a lot of times you're working not only just locally, but you're working with the state on certain guidelines. And I'm sure the federal government comes in and says you need to do certain things. So there's probably many factors that come into when you're
There are. I'm thankful for the people that know those details.
Working it all together. Well, I know technology's played a big role in the schools. And of course, a few years ago, we heard about the high school. Everybody's going to computers, but the technology is there at the younger levels as well.
It is. And our student to, I hesitate to say to computer ratio, because now we more or less say students to device ratio.
Different types of devices.
Whether that be an iPad or a Chromebook or a MacBook or whatever, continues to improve. One of the things that we looked at this year is making sure that we have a sound rotation cycle, and that as those devices are aging, do we have a plan in place, and are we budgeting from year to year to make sure that we can replace those? Because buying, it's one thing, but then the maintenance and replacement is another. So one of the things that we did this year was refresh the Chromebooks for our 8th grade. So that's been a new thing this year. And then for next year, we're looking at high school devices and really getting a handle on those replacement cycles.
Yeah, anybody that owns a computer, they know that they're not going to last forever, and the technology changes too.
The technology changes, and those have just become a standard of delivery for a lot of instruction. But we also need to be mindful of the times where it's time to set that device aside and not use the device. And so getting smart around when is it a tool and when do we need to put it aside for more traditional type applications.
There still are books, there's still our teachers teaching. It's not, you can't learn all through this iPad.
No, and there's a lot of research that you need a blended approach. And so we're trying to be reasonable about that.
We mentioned the school board, and I know that one of the things that the school board has been looking at, and a few years ago, talking about the mission of the district and some of your goals and so forth. We had those set. Tell me about the process of, once you set these goals, how things are developing or how those work out.
Sure. Well, I want to applaud the people that started working on Joplin's strategic plan, because that was something that Dr. Ritter and different forums across the district and the board had worked very hard on. And so when I got here last year, that strategic plan was in place. And it focused on 3 main areas, and that was student support, learner readiness, and being effective and efficient. And I said then it worked well. If you want to put it in real easy language, kids are safe, kids are learning, and we're fiscally responsible.
So we can continue to do that, right?
And so each year we hold forums, and we have a teacher forum, we have a parent forum, and we have a student forum now, and that was new this past year. We meet about 4 times a year with each group, and sometimes last year the groups wanted to combine and meet at the same time, and that made for some great dialogue.
So you get crossover different areas.
Yes, and we looked at that strategic plan, and not just those big 3 goals, but then what are the indicators under those goals that would show whether we're doing that, and is this something we need to continue to work on. And what I have found over the last even 3 years of the district working on that is there has been very small, very subtle changes that you really wouldn't hardly even notice unless you were on those forums. But that's the feedback, is that it's still relevant and it's still guiding our work each day.
So for our student readiness, that's an example of maybe what the curriculum ties into it and what we've been talking about.
Yes, exactly.
And then supporting the students, and of course that ties into, you mentioned all the faculty, the staff, everybody that you're working for the district, that support system.
And those supports through the mental health piece and so much of that. And in the student readiness, it's not just a focus on the students, it's a focus on the teachers as well. And being able to continue to attract and retain quality educators. And so we have to look at those conditions also.
So that probably carries over into, are we paying competitively to other districts to keep people here, to attract those employees?
That's right. And we've worked really hard on our budget, and we've looked at ways not only to decrease expenditures, which I've got to applaud all of our operations departments. Expenditures were down this past year, and everybody was really trying to be good stewards of what they have. But at the same time, we were able to find opportunities to maximize revenue. So we had some places where we could put some things into maybe an interest-bearing checking account as opposed to a regular checking account. And just those subtle changes have had a big impact. And so we were able to approach salary schedules with a positive look this year, and we're moving up within the conference and our surrounding districts and being competitive. We're not at the top yet, but
you've seen some progress.
We're seeing some progress, and we're kind of in the middle of the pack now, which is good. And we want to continue to be able to strengthen not just teacher salaries, but salaries across the district. And then we've also looked at our benefits packages, and we have a more robust benefits package now that includes more choice and more preventive care, and we've seen employee costs of their premiums go down going into
for those
next
in addition
year.
To salaries and so forth.
Yes, so we're trying to improve that as well.
Now you mentioned conference, and of course we're recording in the fall. People are aware of the athletic side of things, especially with football. There's a new conference. So Joplin's interacting with a lot of schools you haven't interacted with before in the athletic aspect.
That's right. It's so exciting to be able to meet our neighbors and compete more locally. It helps our students in that they're not traveling near as far. When you get into basketball season and you're on the road to West Plains in the middle of the week, it's difficult. So now, and the good thing about it is that we're seeing a lot more participation from the community at our competitive events, and not just football, but whether we're talking about volleyball or whatever. And so it's exciting to be able to play Webb City and Carl Junction and those schools. So community support you're seeing growing as well along the athletic side. What about someone who's watching, they may not have a child in school, my children have grown up or so forth. What would you say for them as far as getting involved or being aware of what's happening in the schools? Oh, well, I think it matters to everyone, whether you have a child in school or not, because it should matter to our Chamber of Commerce in terms of attracting business, and our hospitals to be able to attract and retain good doctors, and our Board of Realtors and property values going up. So the school really is a reflection of the community and vice versa. So it matters to everyone. And as far as getting involved, there are many opportunities. We have our TREC program, and we're actually having a training for that for volunteers. I think it's tomorrow afternoon. If you want to come and help tutor, we have Lunch Pals, which is just simply come have lunch with a student, a student that needs a little extra mentoring or whatever, and we have opportunities for that. We have our Bright Futures program that also provides needs for students, and we've got backpacks to stuff on Friday with food. So there's a lot of ways people can step forward. Oh, many ways. We have a lot of good business partners, and they come and help with many things, and it really does take everyone. Great. Well, Dr. Moss, I'd like to thank you, and we've provided a lot of information for the viewers today, ways to get involved. Of course, you have the school district website. They can go to that if they'd like to find out more details. We do. All right. Well, thank you for coming today. Thank you for having me. You're welcome. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope to see you again next week at the same time on the station. We'll see you then.